greatest empire on earth. Babylon, a city of gold, a kingdom that believed it could never fall. Inside the royal palace, a king was celebrating. Wine flowed. Music filled the hall. Thousands of nobles laughed and drank. But that night, something appeared in the palace. Something no army could stop. No weapon could fight. A hand floating in the air. And as it began writing on the wall, the fate of an empire was sealed. This is the terrifying story of the night God judged Babylon. But the most terrifying part of that message was that no one in Babylon could read it. Babylon was the greatest city on earth. Massive walls surrounded it. Golden palaces towered above the streets. And in the center of this powerful empire ruled a king, Belshazzar. Babylon was not just a city, it was a symbol of power. Its walls stretched for miles. Its gates were made of bronze. Historians say chariots could ride side by side on top of the walls. The city seemed impossible to conquer. Inside the walls were hanging gardens, temples of gold, and palaces filled with treasure. To the people of Babylon, their kingdom looked eternal. But no kingdom on earth is eternal. Inside the royal palace, luxury filled every hall. Torches burned along tall pillars. The wealth of an empire surrounded the throne. But tonight, the king had planned something grand. King Belshazzar hosted a feast for 1,000 nobles. Music echoed through the hall. Wine poured endlessly. The celebration grew louder and more reckless. Before we continue this incredible story, if you enjoy discovering hidden and mysterious stories from the Bible, make sure you subscribe to the channel and join us for more powerful biblical stories. Now let's return to the night Babylon changed forever. Belshazzar sat proudly on his throne. A crown of gold rested on his head. He believed Babylon could never fall. But pride has always been dangerous. The nobles laughed. They drank wine. The feast became wild and careless. No one in that room realized history was about to change forever. The music echoed through the palace. Laughter filled the hall. But something deeper was happening that night. The king was not just celebrating. He was challenging heaven itself, because those sacred vessels were not ordinary cups. They had once been used in the temple of God in Jerusalem. They were meant for worship. Now, they were being used in drunken mockery. And God had seen enough. Suddenly, the king made a shocking decision. He ordered the sacred vessels from God's temple in Jerusalem to be brought into the party. Servants carried in the golden cups from the temple, holy vessels meant to honor God, now placed on the table of a drunken feast. Belshazzar lifted the sacred cup and drank from it. The nobles followed. They praised gods of gold, gods of silver, gods of stone. But heaven was watching. The music grew louder. The wine flowed faster. The king laughed without fear. Until everything suddenly stopped. A strange silence filled the hall. The laughter faded. The music stopped. Something was wrong. Then suddenly, a hand appeared in the air, glowing, supernatural, and it began to write on the palace wall. The glowing hand moved slowly across the wall. Every letter burned like fire. The entire room froze. No one moved. No one breathed. For a moment, the most powerful people in the empire felt completely helpless. Because when the supernatural appears, human power means nothing. The mysterious hand moved slowly across the stone. Letters formed in burning light. The entire court stared in terror. Wine cups fell from shaking hands. Nobles stepped back in fear. No one dared speak. King Belshazzar turned pale. His hands trembled. His knees knocked together. The most powerful king in the world was now terrified. The king gripped his throne. His voice shook. Something supernatural had invaded his palace. "Bring the astrologers," he shouted. "Bring the magicians. Someone explain this writing." The wisest men of Babylon rushed into the hall. They stared at the glowing message, but none of them understood it. The wise men studied the message. They examined every letter. They whispered among themselves, but the message remained a mystery. All the wisdom of Babylon, all the knowledge of the empire, could not explain what God had written. Human wisdom can never fully understand divine judgment, the wise men whispered among themselves. They studied the wall, but the message remained a mystery. Then the queen stepped forward. She remembered a man known for wisdom, a man who understood visions. His name was Daniel. Guards quickly brought Daniel into the palace, an old prophet, calm, wise, unshaken by fear. Daniel walked into the royal hall. The glowing message burned behind the king. The entire room waited in silence. Belshazzar spoke nervously. "If you can read the writing, I will reward you with riches and honor, gold, power, royal clothing." The king promised it all, but Daniel was not interested. Daniel looked at the king and calmly said, "Keep your rewards. I will still tell you the truth." Daniel reminded the king of his father, Nebuchadnezzar, a king who once became proud, and God humbled him. Daniel stood calmly in the middle of the hall, while everyone else trembled, because Daniel had seen God move before. He had survived lions, he had interpreted dreams, and he knew something the king did not. When God speaks, no king can stop what comes next. But you, Daniel said, have not humbled yourself. You knew the truth, and still you mocked heaven. Then Daniel read the glowing words on the wall. MENE, MENE, TEKEL, PARSIN. Daniel explained the message. God has numbered the days of your kingdom. You have been weighed and found wanting. The words on the wall were short, but their meaning was devastating. MENE, God has counted the days of your kingdom. TEKEL, you have been weighed on God's scales and found lacking. PARSIN, your kingdom will be divided and given to another. 3 words, 3 judgments, and Babylon's fate was sealed. And your kingdom will be given to the Medes and the Persians. The judgment was final. Belshazzar sat frozen. The message was clear. Babylon would fall. Outside the city, the Persian army was already moving. Soldiers entered the gates of Babylon, silently, without warning. Inside the palace, guards ran through the corridors. The kingdom was collapsing. The mighty empire of Babylon fell in a single night. The throne room became silent. The king was gone. The empire was gone. But the glowing message still burned on the wall. A warning. A judgment. Babylon had ruled the world for decades. Its kings believed their empire would last forever. But in one single night, everything changed. The palace became silent. The throne stood empty. And the kingdom of Babylon became history. Slowly, the letters began to fade. The room grew dark. And with it, the story of Babylon ended. Because sometimes, when God writes a warning, it means the time to change has already passed. The story of the handwriting on the wall is more than history. It is a warning. Power cannot save a nation. Wealth cannot protect a kingdom. And pride always leads to downfall. Because when God weighs a kingdom, only righteousness matters. The writing on the wall faded, but its warning remains. Every kingdom, every leader, every life will one day be weighed. If you enjoy discovering powerful stories like this from the Bible, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because there are many more hidden stories in Scripture that most people have never heard.